Chronometry calibrated. The gateway will open in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Analyzing data. Likelihood of parallel universes now at 3%. Continuing analysis of the many worlds hypothesis.
The price of podcasting is high. It always has been. And it's a price I'm willing to pay. And if I'm not the only one, then so be it. But I'm willing to bet I'm not. Welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, Gayfesh. Today we're continuing Steve Rogers' journey in the MCU with what I think is his strongest solo outing, Captain America the Winter Soldier. But it's not about what I think. It's about what America thinks. So let me ask the most American people I know. On my left is Moss.
Hello, I'm here.
And on my other left is DemonMama.
Hello.
All right, let's get into the MCU. How'd you like this one, DemonMama? I know you have been, you are the skeptic in the crowd. You are the one who does not like these movies. So, and I know you hadn't seen this one yet. So give me your thoughts. I had
not seen this one. And it was a weird movie, but I didn't dislike it. And there were things that I really liked about it. Like, I have so many thoughts about this movie. I can't wait. I've been excited to talk about this one.
Awesome.
Since I watched it. So, yeah, I liked it. But it felt weird to me. There was a lot of things about this movie that was very strange. I really did on a Captain America level. So you're absolutely right. This is his absolute best. I was like, oh my God, we have a character. We have Captain America has a personality. It's amazing. It's a little bit of whiplash going from Captain America in the Avengers directly into this movie, where I was like, whoa, they really went a different direction with this character. Yep. He is much less like chipper and himbo-y. He's like thinking about a lot. He's going through a lot. He's like got a lot of sadness in his life. It's like, this is the saddest guy on the planet. And you do not get really any of that from Avengers.
I mean, you get a little bit. Like at the beginning of the movie, he's like depressed and like punching his feelings into a punching bag. He
but
talks
like, you don't
about
see why. It's kind of like you got to imply it all. It's all by implication. Yeah. But anyway, there was a lot that I liked about this movie. There was some stuff that I thought was incredibly goofy, and I'm sure we'll get into all that. But that's my overall feeling on it.
All right, and Moss, your first thoughts?
I have felt in the past that this movie is like one of the more forgettable Marvel movies. I'm not sure why that has been the case. I'm like, I don't know if it's because there aren't as many kind of standout moments. Like the Avengers has so many different standout moments where you're like, that's memeable. I remember that later. And I feel like this movie just is a little bit more understated in those moments. So I ended up watching it 3 times actually to prepare for the podcast because I was like, I got to make sure that I remember things about this movie. And yeah, overall, I thought it was really interesting. I think this movie more than most other ones, at least in this Captain America run through, like this movie begs a lot of questions about our real world that I think probably makes it more interesting politically to analyze. But yeah, overall, I enjoyed the characters better than I have previously, especially Black Widow, and like the relationship with Black Widow and Steve Rogers is really nice. So yeah, it definitely has parts of it that are kind of boring to me, but there are some good standout moments, and overall I enjoyed it pretty well.
I feel like they nailed Black Widow so well in this one. Right from the start, you can tell, like, okay, well, she's doing the whole like ribbing, sarcastic stuff because she's jokey in the Joss Whedon movies and stuff like that. But here, there's a little bit more of it. Like I keep going back to that refrain that in Russo movies, characters tell jokes to hide their pain, and like because Natasha is such a dishonest person, because she's such a secretive spy who will do very amoral things, it's very clear, like, and like the cockiness with which she like will sarcastically say something like, Steve catches her on her own op while they're like rescuing hostages, and she's just like, well, this is awkward. Or when like he goes back to find the flash drive, but she's already taken it, and because he had hidden it in a vending machine with bubblegum, she announces it by just blowing a bubble.
Yeah, I
freedom.
did like that. I did like
Um,
that.
I really like her. And as far as like the political messaging of the movie, like obviously it's a fairly basic like, oh, you know, freedom versus fear kind of a thing. You know, obviously it's a little on the nose to just have like big weapons platforms that are going to kill all of Hydra's enemies or whatnot. So it's not the most subtle thing, but they're trying to do a lot with it. The secret enemy from within kind of thing. And like, you know, a lot of ink has been used talking about how this movie kind of harkens back to that 70s political thriller that you would usually see Robert Redford star in, like 3 Days of the Condor. And of course, they have him as the villain. And there was a lot of these things, like in phase 2, they were trying to like branch out into different cinematic genres, but just putting superheroes on top of them. So like this one is definitely a political thriller, kind of like, you know, like 3 Days of the Condor or Manchurian Candidate or something like that.
You know, it's kind of an odd thing because I think in part I completely understand where Moss was coming from with like saying like there's aspects of this movie that are really forgettable. There was a lot of stuff that I felt was like, okay, actually this is pretty cool, but yeah, the political thriller stuff is like, in my opinion, the like roughest part of the movie, where it's just like there's so many. It's because it's just mostly because it's so shallow. Like the characters who are like CIA characters that really don't have much of a personality. They're just kind of like a guy that has like, they serve a role, I guess, in the structure of a movie, but they aren't really a character in and of themselves, and they don't really have motivations. Like there's this one guy who I can't remember his name. Stillwell. I'm thinking
Sitwell.
of some
Sitwell.
Sitwell. Oh my God, the whole movie I was making these. We were making these stupid jokes about like people's names after the reveal of the Pierce character, who's like the most obvious villain that's ever there. It's like, oh, he's gonna pierce the shield, like, oh. And so we were like, I was like, when the Sitwell guy was like kind of revealed as a villain, I'm like, oh my God, his name is Sitwell because he won't stand up for what's right.
No,
I
honestly think his name was Sitwell because he was in Avengers. He was on the helicarrier, and I thought he was just named that because he does a really good job sitting at his station. He sits well.
Yeah, it was just like, but yeah, the CIA political thriller stuff, just like it doesn't quite break through to like for me. And some of the pieces of it are like interesting in how they intersect with the other stuff that they're doing with the superhero stuff. But a lot of it was just like, oh man. I will admit I fell asleep during the first viewing of this movie and had to watch it a second time. And
you keep doing that.
This one. I know, I'm sorry. This one was a little more on I was falling asleep during the CIA parts, and then I would get woken up whenever there was like a fight or whatever. And the second time I was fine. It's fine. But, you know, I'm not going to come in here having not watched the actual movie, staying awake the whole time. But there were these parts of the movie where the pacing just kind of like took a dive because all of a sudden it's like, don't you understand? We need to go through the department of whatever. And then they have like, I called them Swagless Seal last time. They're even worse in this movie.
Oh, the strike team?
No, the World Council, they're World Council people, but you don't know where this was.
The World Security Council or whatever it's called.
Yeah, and they're just kind of like, they're even dumber in this movie, and they're kind of there to just be like, these are like, oh man, don't these bureaucrats freaking suck? And it's just like, I don't know. Oh my God, there's a part about that I'm gonna like, and I laughed so. Oh my God, I was laughing so hard. Okay, so okay, go ahead. Sorry, I kind of hijacked the part about that, but I wanted to mention like I do kind of see where Moss is coming from and saying like certain aspects of this movie are super forgettable in my opinion.
Well, and also I feel like especially for like the political messaging that they're going for, you know, Cap just declares that he's like, no, this is like, you know, he's like, this isn't a system that can be reformed. This is a system that we have to dismantle, which, like, you know, I would argue that the first line of the movie is on your left, which is subtle foreshadowing that maybe Captain America is going a little anarchist. No, but it's completely undermined at the end because Black Widow is like, you know, she's doing a Senate subcommittee hearing or something like that. And her speech is just like, you're not going to put any of us in a prison because you need us. The world is a vulnerable place. And yes, we helped make it that way, but we're also the ones best qualified to defend it. And it's like, okay, there's the status quo liberalism that the MCU is good at. They had to throw that in at the end. Now, granted, she is not Cap. She does not like share all of Cap's ideals, but it's still presented in the film language as part of the conclusion, as like what you're supposed to agree with. But it like completely undermines what Cap was doing.
There are so many parts of the ending that undermine the messages of the overall film, like the overall movie being like, okay, like literally in the middle they have like the Zola guy where he's like, Captain America, I am speaking to you now from on top of our surveillance machine. You are in my brain. Like that part. That part in the movie where he gives the, by the way, this is a side note, but I swear to God, whoever the writers of this movie were directly referencing Metal Gear Solid 2. There are multiple parts in this movie. The movie starts the exact same way that Metal Gear Solid 2 starts. The beginning of Metal Gear Solid 2, you jump out of a thing and dive into the water and get onto a boat. And then you do a bunch of stealth stuff on a boat. He's like fighting a bunch of people. You're literally taking down people and throwing their bodies aside and all this shit. And then there's like this in the middle, there's this speech from like a green computer guy, exactly like the Major in Metal Gear Solid 2, who gives a speech about memes and about how they're controlling the minds of the people without like making them feel like they're being controlled. Literally, like I was like, this is Metal Gear Solid 2 as fuck. It's like not, they don't have the courage to go as far as Metal Gear Solid 2 goes. And
I feel like you try hard enough, you especially could probably find some way any movie connects to Metal Gear.
Maybe Metal Gear the series, but Metal Gear Solid 2, that's like, it's so specific. Like there's so much, the topic of like Metal Gear Solid 2 is so much around like surveillance and population control and like how governments can control people through subterfuge and influence of the media. It's like, it's the same basic topic. But the point of this was ultimately to say that like the ending there's like one of the things that I feel like alongside what you were saying about like Black Widow's character kind of giving this speech that's like, oh, we're strong, you need us. Like you can't get rid of us from whatever you want. It's like, was very weird. But also there's another aspect, which is that they spend multiple shots showing like the good SHIELD agents getting jobs at the CIA. And it's like, and it's just like, oh yeah, you know, our criticisms of this system stop at SHIELD. And it's just like, no, like, how do you do that? It's the same problem. It's like a mirror of the problem that was present in Captain America, the First Avenger, which was like, they had to make like Hydra be worse than the Nazis. And in this one, it's like, oh, well, you had to make SHIELD like worse than the CIA. And it's the same basic. It's just like a mirror version of it where it's like, oh, no, look, the good ones, they went to work for a good surveillance organization like the CIA and NSA.
Famously the good ones.
I know. It was so weird. And I didn't understand why. Like,
well, you also have to remember that a lot of Hollywood movies, especially Hollywood movies that like involve like military hardware in the film, get DoD funding and approval. So like the DoD has no problem with a fictional organization being depicted as evil, but you know, you throw in the CIA at the end. It's like, oh no, see this, she's a good one. She's getting a job at the CIA. That's one of ours. That's good. We don't have a shield, so that's fine. You make them evil.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of dark and sickening and fucked up the way that a movie that's about like how the surveillance state is bad, that's like pulling on all this stuff about, you know, controlling populations or whatever, is then like also engaging in that in a very real way where it's like, yeah, we're talking about the bad ones. Don't worry about the CIA. Don't worry about the US military. Literally, let's like portray these like generals as like, oh yeah, they're like well-meaning people that are on the good side. They're not nasty Hydra people. Also, I don't know, maybe we should talk about other stuff first, but I wanted to talk about a weird thing that I noticed during the movie that was kind of like, this is another weird part of it, which was I had this point like after the Zola speech and after they did all the Hydra stuff where I was just like, oh man, like this movie could be taken the wrong way really badly and really easily in a way that like I know they didn't intend, but it's like, oh yeah, the answer to our problem, the problem with our country isn't like anything to do with its foundations. It isn't anything to do with the philosophy or whatever. It's just that there is a secret parasitic group, a small parasitic group of people that lurks among us and looks just like us, but you can't quite tell until they're revealed to be evil, that needs to be purged. And like, that was just like, oh man, like they're doing it again. They're doing the thing where it's like, you try to make a movie that's like refuting like a fascistic authoritarian worldview, but then just ends up leaning on the same exact tropes that group would like utilize to gain power.
Yeah, I think it is definitely worth pointing out like that. Basically, like to make it explicit for the audience, like this is following anti-Semitic tropes. This idea of like, yeah, the lizard people among us. Yeah, I definitely think that is one of the more insidious things about the status quo movies. Because again, that's what Marvel is all about. Like, it's supposed to be enjoyable. It's supposed to reinforce your sense of patriotism. Like Captain America himself is a symbol of America's great ideals, or the ideals that we hope that America stands for. And, you know, it does reinforce this idea that the military is good, or, you know, that maybe there's officers who give bad orders. Or like you said, like the CIA is like the good version of our intelligence apparatus. Because at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, we need to reinforce this idea that America good, even though Captain America's whole arc here like has to do with disillusionment. Yeah, again, it's never really directly at America as a concept. I was interested in, I guess, some of the like plot stuff. I just wanted to talk about it before we get too far in the weeds on the political stuff. Like, does it seem to anyone like Fury changed dramatically in his position toward the beginning of the film? Yeah, so I don't know if that's like he was misrepresenting his beliefs to Cap in order to make Cap feel like this was a bad idea and to manipulate Cap, or if he genuinely discovered Hydra right at the beginning. Like, did he not know about all this?
Well, he was investigating, right? Like the mission that they go in, like Fury orchestrate, like Fury hired the pirates to take over the Lemurian Star.
But he knew that there was something going on. Yeah.
So that he could look at further into Insight. But it is weird that he is the one pitching Project Insights to Cap when he's the one who's just like, I think something fucky is going on with this. But he doesn't tell that to Cap, you know? Not until he's already been targeted for, you know, assassination, which happens after he tells Robert Redford, hey, we got to shut this down. So yeah, it's weird, but like also, you know, it's a very easy read to just say, well, Nick Fury is a spy. He lies for a living and he's very good at it. So
all he does is eat, hush up and lie.
I can accept that read when you're looking deeper and analyzing it, but from just your popcorn bucket audience member, it can feel a little jarring. It's like, wait, I thought Fury was in favor of this.
It makes it seem like Cap's opposition makes him notice that something is wrong. That's almost how it reads.
It could be that, but then why would he have hijacked the Lemurian Star at the beginning?
Yeah.
I feel weird. Like the problem with Nick Fury in this movie is that you just go into the movie confused about like where he stands, and then you leave the movie just kind of shrugging about why he did most of the things that he did, because it's just like there are parts in this movie where it feels like it's trying to say something about Nick Fury's character. I don't know. I struggle with that, so I don't know why my brain wants to go to that. I don't even remember. It's a DC hero, right, or something? I can't remember.
Cage is an actor.
Oh yeah, Nicolas Cage. Oh, okay, that's why. Yeah. I was thinking of like fuck. Anyway, yeah,
Johnny
you're right.
Cage from Mortal Kombat, maybe.
There's just too many names that are like that. Like I don't know. It's just whatever. But the Nick Fury thing was getting me. Anyway, with Nick Fury, it's like there's a part in the movie where he's like getting chased by a bunch of cops and getting shot at, and he's talking to his car and stuff. And in that scene, like he straight up uses civilians like as a way to like survive and stuff. Like he at one point deliberately slows down his car, really, like he slams the brakes so the two cars will go forward, and a DHL, which is like
it's a Penske truck actually,
or Penske, whatever. Yeah, Penske is that's actually what I meant, because the whole point is like those are like usually rental trucks, so it's just like that's clearly some random fucking person who just like plowed into.
I need to point something out about the Penske truck, because later when Bucky attacks their car and pulls Sitwell out and tosses him out of the car, Sitwell goes and gets hit by a Penske truck. And I assume from production they just, had one Penske truck, and I assume it was product placement because, like anything with a logo. Oh, the
product placement in this movie was crazy.
Right. So I'm assuming Penske was paying for this. But there's also, because there's this Penske truck that just shows up to like kill bad guys randomly, there's a fan theory that it's actually the Punisher driving that car. It wasn't random, and then he was like deliberately hanging out going, I gotta run somebody over.
Yeah, it's like in that part, I kind of just got the idea that like what this was trying to say was like, oh, Nick Cage is like a guy who will do anything to like forward his agenda. But then it's like, no, he's kind of trying to befriend Cap, and he actually has like some principles and lines. But you just can't really, I feel like by the end of the movie, you don't have enough time with Nick Fury's character that you can like actually like pull anything away on his character. And it's also kind of just weird. It speaks to the weird structure of this movie that like Nick Fury, who is like central to like what the movie is setting up and the message of the movie, is like dead for half the movie. Well, which is just like
also okay. Here's the thing. I wish they had the balls to kill him off for real. Not that I don't like the character of Nick Fury. I enjoy Sam Jackson in these movies, and this is like a recurring thing where like, and it's been a problem in comics for years where somebody dies and then they bring him back, but they usually bring him back like when like a decade later when they get a new writer on, and that writer's like, I want to work with that character, so we'll do something. But like for these movies, it's like even in the same movie, or like they'll die at the end of one movie and then be brought back right at the beginning of the next movie. And it just keeps happening. And now with the fucking multiverse, like
Robert Downey Jr. being cast.
Spoilers for Endgame, which you haven't seen, but I'm sure you like know. But like, yeah, like, you kill Iron Man, and then literally the next Avengers movie we're getting is Robert Downey Jr. coming back. So like, if you're just watching the Avengers movies, it's like he never left. And I wish that they had the stones to kill someone for real, permanently.
I think that this is a problem, like DemonMama just said earlier, that the conclusion of the movie undermines some of its message. But I noticed this also in the middle of the movie. There's this speech that Cap gives that you referenced up top that's like, I'm willing, sometimes you have to lay down your life in the pursuit of these ideals and like freedom. And like, basically he's giving the soldier speech to everybody over the intercom. And then you've got this nerdy guy who refuses an order by the Hydra guy, Rumlow. Yeah.
Crossbones, yeah.
Yeah. And it like, I think undermines the message a little bit that he is about to get shot by Rumlow. And then the Agent 13 like kicks the guy out of the way. Like, I genuinely think that undermines the message, as problematic as that may be, that sometimes, being a soldier, fighting for ideals like freedom, like preserving people's privacy and everything, that sometimes you do have to be willing to give the ultimate sacrifice. That's why Steve Rogers himself is such a popular character, I think, because he was always willing to put himself on the line with the grenade in the first movie. And then like literally he basically feels like, I'm going to die at the end of this film. And then he gets, resurrected, and like, sure, that's so that we can have a Captain America story. But I think that the message of self-sacrifice is lost if nobody ever really meaningfully loses anything.
Well, if you pay attention, though, because like, the nerdy guy who refuses to launch Project Insight, like he gets spared. But literally every other S.H.I.E.L.D. agent who like you see standing up to Hydra fucking dies. Like you have that one scene where it's like, come on, we're the only air support Cap has. And then Bucky kills every single one of those pilots.
True.
You've got like people running. It's like, don't launch. And then he gets shot. So like, Cap's speech did inspire a lot of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents to fight back. And aside from that room where with Agent 13 and the nerdy guy, they all fucking died.
They're just faceless. Like,
I know they're just faceless, and I understand it's a superhero movie, so that Cap has to be the one to save the day. But like, you could have had some small wins from S.H.I.E.L.D. agents other than the captain's orders bit, which like only delayed the launch by like 30 seconds.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it feels pretty like, and sure, Steve was definitely willing to die. I mean, he would have died if Bucky hadn't, pulled him out of the river. But it felt a little odd that they would write it in such a way that everybody Steve inspires dies.
Sure. Yeah. It's just that, like, I think that those others, it's easy to, like, not connect them to that human, like, I'm on Cap's side, the refusal to obey, like, an unlawful order or whatever. I don't know. Like, I recognize you're correct. A lot of faceless SHIELD people died. It just felt really off to me about that one character whose face we actually see, whose defiance we actually get to see, and him being spared. But you're right. I definitely, like, did not clock how many SHIELD agents were like, I'm on Cap's side, like, full of bullet holes.
Kind of connected to what you were saying. I had no idea where this movie, like, nothing. I've never had basically anything about this movie spoiled for me.
Mhm.
So I was, like, in here and I was pissing off everybody I was watching the movie with because I kept saying that Nick Fury was a clone. And I was just like, he's a clone. I was like, because I picked up on the Metal Gear Solid 2 stuff. I'm like, he's got to be a clone. It's got to be. We got to have clones in here. And they ended up going with the tetrodotoxin B. I should have seen that one fucking coming. I should have seen
of course.
that one coming.
Naturally.
I mean, I knew he wasn't dead. That's why I kept saying he was a clone. But I mean, really, rookie mistake on me to not remember that tetrodotoxin B can make you seem like you're dead to everybody, including medical professionals. And so,
no, those medical professionals were all in on it.
They
were all in
on
on
it.
it. Yeah. Like,
So-
like that scene where Fury dies, the entire medical staff is in on it. Fury, Maria Hill, she's there, she's in on it. That is a show for, like, there's a couple of Hydra agents also in the viewing room. That's a show for them. That's to sell that, yes, Fury is dead so that he can go underground. But you wonder where all those medical professionals went that were, that knew the secret that Fury was still alive.
CIA, Operation Paperclip 2.
Yeah.
I did find that really funny that it was like, there's a part where Black Widow, like, the camera goes on her and it's like, oh, Operation Paperclip. And I was just like, that's like, I don't know, it's just really funny. Like, the way they just, like, name drop it. Like, it was funny to me.
In that whole sequence, it made me think of something else, because they're, like, going through and they, like, see the portraits on the wall of the founders of S.H.I.E.L.D. and there's Howard Stark's portrait. And then there's Peggy right next to him is Peggy, and Black Widow is just like, who's that girl? And I'm like, she was the first director of S.H.I.E.L.D. You're, like, one of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s top agents. How do you not know this? Like, I'm pretty sure there's, like, in like Ant-Man, there's a flashback to, like, the 80s or 90s where she's still S.H.I.E.L.D. director. So you should know who she is.
It's a pretty big oversight.
I couldn't pay attention. Well, I didn't really put that together. That's a good observation. I was too busy in that scene laughing at the Tommy Lee Jones.
I didn't even notice his portrait.
His portrait looked so funny. I literally put it in my notes because I was laughing so hard. I don't know why it made me laugh that hard. It's just like, it looked so out of place. Like, the other actors looked fine. They looked like, but he just looked so out of place, and it made me laugh so hard. I don't know. It just, if you watch that part again, just, like, look at his portrait. It is, like, notably different than the other two, and it just made me laugh really hard.
I'm just thinking in terms of, like, little bits to that, like, references to the previous movie, because obviously most of the people in the previous movie can't come back because it's a century later. But they have, like,
did, though.
I mean, you got a couple. You had Peggy and you had Bucky.
And Zola.
And Zola, sure, but, like, there's good sci-fi reason for Zola, and Peggy's old. Also, like, they CGI'd her old age makeup, and it, like, but you can tell her facial movements are still of a young woman doing it. It doesn't quite work.
It does not work.
But the whole, like, Smithsonian sequence is literally just there to be like, we know nobody saw the first movie. Come on. So here, we're catching you up. We also have to remind you about Bucky because nobody remembers Bucky. So
when they did the reveal, of Bucky, I was like, I think there's like a flash like a from the Flash. There's like a Lex Luthor or something takes over the body of the Flash or something, and he's like, oh, now I can figure out who this
I
is.
have
And he
no
takes off
idea
the
who
mask.
this is. Yeah.
It's just like, I have no who the fuck is this? Like I was
Exactly.
like, that was literally, I was like, who? I was like, who's this guy? I was like, I knew, like, because I had been told that was supposed to be Bucky, but I was like, I legitimately don't remember this guy. I don't remember what he looks like, just on a base level. And then when it was like, this is Bucky, I was like, Bunky Barnes. And I was just like, I don't know who this guy is. So I was just like, I don't know. I don't remember anything about his personality really either. I think I remember
He didn't
that, like,
have one in the first movie. He was just,
we did talk
know,
about it.
like, he was kind of like, Cap, you gotta not get into these fights so often. You got a good heart, but I'll watch out for you, buddy.
His personality
like
is
the-
best friend. That's it. That's his
Yeah.
personality.
It was kind of weird, and like, I don't know. It also just, it felt like they didn't give it enough room to breathe. They didn't give it enough, like, I don't know. Like, I did like that there was like, okay, this part I didn't like how it was set up, but I like that they gave Captain America his little moment of being like, nah, I'm not gonna take down my buddy, my pal. Like, I'm not gonna give up on him or whatever. But I
Mhm.
also don't know why they had Sam say that line and not Black Widow, because Black Widow's definitely the one who'd be more like, now you're gonna have to snap this guy's neck. But like, Sam is the one who does that. But like, Sam's personality is like, he's the one who's been inspiring Captain America through the whole film to like be more compassionate and question things, you know, because it's like, he's like, I've seen so much war and I lost my wingman, which was so funny. But I was like, oh man. But
I have to, like, just as an aside, every time somebody needs their super suit in this movie, they just yada it, because, like, you know, he meets Sam, and Sam just seems like, okay, here's a new friend, just like a regular guy, a veteran. But no, he just happens to be a superhero who's got, you know, a wingsuit. Except that he's like, yeah, this super suit, it's like in a top secret CIA base behind like 3, you know, feet of steel. And Cap's like, oh, no problem, we'll just do it we'll just do it off screen.
Mhm.
And then just the next time we see Sam, he's got the wings.
yeah, I thought they were setting up for like they were gonna do some kind of action thing, and I don't know, maybe have it
Nope.
reveal something else about. No, it was literally like off screen. I was very surprised by that. Like,
Well, and also there's like a plot hole in this movie because Cap, you know, he runs away from the Shield base, and that's the last time you see him in his stealth suit. And then he has to break into the Smithsonian to get his World War II suit. And you're left there wondering what happened to his stealth suit. Couldn't he wear that one? And the reason that it's not addressed is because they did some changes. Originally, Hawkeye was going to be in this movie for one scene, and it was going to be the scene where Cap is escaping from the Shield base. And instead of the Quinjet showing up on the bridge to fight him, it would have been Hawkeye showing up to fight him. But Hawkeye's putting on a show, and right as like Cap beats him, Hawkeye says, "There's a tracker in your suit." And that's why he doesn't wear it. But they dropped that. And so there's just no reason why Cap doesn't have that suit and has to steal one. Other than they want to have him, you know, like the stealth suit is obviously it's just blue. It doesn't have, you know, the red and white as much. And they gotta have, you know, it's Captain America. You gotta have the red, white, and blue. It just feels like they changed it and then they didn't like throw in some line somewhere. Like all they had to do is like had to lose the suit. Tracker was in it. And that's all they would have to say is like they found a tracker in it.
Yeah, but they did have to shoehorn in the Stan Lee appearance.
Oh,
And
yeah.
also,
You know, oh, boy, I'm so fired.
I'm like 98% sure that Robert Downey Jr. does the voiceover in the Smithsonian.
No, that is actually Gary Sinise.
Really? Okay. I was like, I can hear notes of Robert Downey in this if he was just doing like an old time radio voice.
No, that was Gary
Correction.
Sinise. I'm glad I knew that.
Yeah. Fun facts with autistic folks.
this movie was a weird one, and like, okay, so I wanna give one small, or not even small. I want to give one piece of credit to this movie that again, another thing, like these movies have so much like action scenes and stuff in them, so much more interesting, obvious, a massive improvement from the early days of the first Avenger. That movie. Fight scenes were garbage. They were boring. Avengers was a step up. This movie is a big step up. They had everything from like just
the bridge
and
scene
like
in my mind is the best fight scene in the MCU, bar none.
The one with the Bunky or the one?
Yeah, Bucky, where Bucky first confronts them, kills Sitwell, and then they get captured at the end, and Bucky's mask gets off, and he's like, "Who's Bucky?" So much of that fight
I
is
don't
so
know who
good.
I am. How do you know who I am?
Like the verticality of the fight, they go from the overpass to down below, and the sound design, like the way that the bullets ricochet off Cap's shields, the way that they pitch up, like there's a guy with a minigun who's just shooting at Cap the whole time, and Cap's just running toward him, and you hear like the pitch of the bullets like pitching up as he gets closer. Like I love that sound design. It's just, and then you've got the whole like knife fight between Steve and Bucky, where Bucky like throws the knife in the air and catches it with his other hand and stuff. Like that knife flip, like that is a gif that people have just been like obsessing over for like years.
He ran so that Arya Stark could fly.
The other one that I thought of in this movie that was like very memorable to me was the one arm Cap elevator fight with like,
oh yeah,
I'm like, damn, they actually like thought about the environment and had him do some cool moves and like had him flip around on his arm and like have to keep fighting against this thing, pulling his arm out of the way. And like, there's all that they've got like 3 different guys with his little zappy sticks. And I don't know, that was just like, it was all of the fight choreography was like actually there in this movie. And it wasn't like an ensemble movie. So there was a little more like punchiness and intimacy to like each of the fights that they did. I mean, hell, even on the, even in the opener on the, when he's on the boat, the Metal Gear Solid 2 boat, and you know what they didn't have the courage to put in for Metal Gear Solid 2 that would have been better? They absolutely should have had him, just like in Metal Gear Solid 2, finish that section on the boat by fighting a lady with unshaved pits. That would have been the way to do it. Instead, they just had generic bad guy.
Well, Batroc, he's French or Algerian, so he probably doesn't shave his pits either.
True.
He's and also like thinking about that guy Batroc, because he's a comic book villain, Batroc the Leaper, and like his costume in the comics is like very like it's like like a spandex one piece that's like purple and green, but in this movie it's just like a jacket that's like desaturated purple and green, and it's like he's like Disney bounding as Batroc the Leaper. If you don't know what Disney bounding is, if you go to the Disney parks, you are not allowed to dress as a Disney character because they don't want people confusing a random guest with like a cast member. And obviously exceptions, little kids can do it, but for adults, so since they're not allowed to like actually dress, they will go it's called Disney bounding, where they will pick articles of clothing that are casual articles of clothing that still evoke the character that they're trying to represent. And so that's what it felt like with Batroc.
It's very strange, by the way. If any of you go on TikTok and look for this, the type of person who makes TikToks about this, I think that we should study their brains. Like, I don't know what the deal is, but maybe that's just true of TikTok in general.
I mean, it's the Disney. I mean, it's movie's a Disney product, so it all kind of ties back together. The weird, I don't know. I guess I can't imagine like just like, I need to like vaguely look like Gaston when I go to this park because I'm like so obsessed with that. Like the Disney adult thing is like a phenomenon that it's a type of fandom. It's a type of obsession that I don't fully understand.
Yeah. People will get big mad at you for criticizing it conceptually.
I have been to Disneyland 3 times, and like, it's a really fun place. I really enjoy Disneyland.
I've been to Disney World. I've been to Disneyland, I think once. I've been to Disney World a whole bunch of times. I used to spend a lot of time in Florida, so I would go to Epcot every once in a while, and it was like I don't know. It's the parks they're not bad. I mean, like. It's just like how like the classic Disney movies aren't like bad. They're all enjoyable and they're great. And there's lots to enjoy. There's just also like a culture around it that's like, obviously, I don't know. I like people being passionate about stuff.
Fandom like any other, except that like while also being a fandom mostly tied up around like, stuff people engaged with as children and never really grew out of. It's like, when people are telling like Harry Potter fans to read another book. But and like, I'm a big Star Trek fan because I grew up watching Star Trek. But with Disney, when you're just a fan of like Disney, the company, which is like one of the largest companies on Earth, it gets to feeling a little weird. Like I dated a Disney adult for like 6 years, and she definitely wasn't the most over the top about it. Like there have definitely been Disney adults who were more severe. But
I
even
knew
then, there would be
someone like
times
that.
she would get a little defensive about, like, saying that Walt Disney was an anti-Semite.
Oh my god. See, this is the
So
problem. It's when you become like ideologically entrenched in something because of your fandom of a company. This is part of the whole problem with Harry Potter. And I know we're on a deviation. I'll wrap it up. But like I wrapped up the criticisms of Harry Potter and Disney together in a video that I made not too long ago. And I think that's where the problem is with these folks, is when they get defensive about things. They're like, well, she was the best author at the time and blah, blah, blah. She broke all these glass ceilings, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Like, calm down. You can enjoy the thing without being like rabid about it. And so there's like a spectrum of sincerity. We're doing a Marvel thing right now.
I also think, though, that there's like a company allegiance that's more than like an interest allegiance that happens with the Disney thing. And it's very encouraged, in my opinion, by Disney. Like this like there is a consumerist angle that's like, there's not a whole lot of other fandoms that have the same level of like consumerist base outside of like, maybe you could say like Fortnite or something, where it's like literally that's how entrenched it is, which is another obsession that a lot of people are like, hey, we got to be a little more careful about this. That's kind of crazy to have a company like trying to get kids to have schoolyard fights over who's got the nicer skin in Fortnite or whatever. But it's like, yeah, there's like a level of consumerism that's so entrenched in the like Disney obsession. That's like, I don't know, it's off-putting and a little weird. And
wrapping that up, going back to the movie though, we were talking about the elevator sequence, and there's this moment, like, I love just the build. He goes into the elevator, there's just a couple other guys who are talking to him, but you can tell something's a little tense. And then you get more guys and more guys and more guys coming in, and nobody's getting off. And like I don't know if this is an homage to Total Recall, where Steve looks at the guy who just has that bead of sweat going down. Because if you remember in Total Recall, that's how Arnold could tell that the guy was lying, because he had just that bead of sweat going down. I don't know if that's a reference or if it's just like a general trope. But then you also had like one of the last groups of people to come in are just the beefiest, like Slavic looking dudes coming in. And one of them just goes into the elevator and goes, records. I'm like, this guy looks like he eats books. Is he going to lunch? Like, what's he going to records for? Come on. But no, I love that whole sequence. It's so good. But also that shield is just fucking magic, because Steve drops like 30 stories. He goes out of the elevator and falls 30 stories and lands on his shield and is fine.
Okay,
and
well, so listen, this is a thing about Captain Rogers, though, because at the beginning of the movie, he skydives and he plummets down.
That's true.
His legs should have been shattered. Like, he goes in he like dives in.
It's a movie, water's soft.
Yeah. But still, like, I mean, I guess appreciate that, like, he lands on his shoulder and it's like he does have to take a second to recover. But absolutely, like, something
completely unbreakable bones.
Yeah, something happened. It's like he has Avatar bones from Blue People Avatar. They're like carbon reinforced or something. Like,
he doesn't drink milk.
I don't know.
Milkium. It's a substitute for milk that has vibranium in it or something.
I don't know. Like, the stuff like that was, I did find it interesting, because I had a question like halfway through the movie where I was like, we haven't seen Captain America get hit with a bullet, I don't think. Do they poke hit through him, or is he bulletproof? And they answer that later in the film. He is not bulletproof, which is like, okay, so he's like super resistant to impact, but
he can dodge bullets unless they're plot relevant bullets. Bucky was shooting, so he had to get hit because that was his best friend. So it was relevant. It was at the end. He has to crawl his way to the circuit board and insert the thing into the thing. Second movie in a row where he has to work on a circuit board and just somehow manages to figure it out despite being from the fucking 40s.
Also, cars probably real different now than they were back then. Probably a lot harder to hotwire a car now. I find it surprising that skill held up over time, that he was able to like hotwire a modern SUV.
He's probably done some he at the beginning when Sam tells him about the Trouble Man soundtrack and Cap pulls out his thing and he's talking about how the internet is so helpful. He's probably looking up YouTube tutorials on how to
Is
do
he
shit.
like, I need to know how to jack a car again just in case? Like, I don't know. It
It's
just
a
seems
useful
a little
skill
funny.
to know. He
Sure.
is working with Shield. They are doing covert operations. It's understandable.
Movies as a whole with carjacking, it's always like, seems like the easiest thing in the world, and that's like, okay.
There's
Yeah.
one thing that I want to point out too when you've got because the list that he has, I'll put it on the list. Apparently in that scene, like depending on what country you watch that movie in, they used a different list that would be stuff that was more relevant to whatever locality it was playing in. But
makes sense.
here for the American audience, we can assume that's the actual list, and because it's an American film. One of the lines in his notebook was,
I'm sorry, I find that so funny.
What?
Like, the idea that like he'd be like in like, I don't know, like in the local version for like China or something. It's like he's got like the memoirs of Mao Zedong or something on there. It's just like down to read some Mao, you know.
okay, so but one of the lines is Star Wars / Trek, but he's also got Wars crossed out, which means that he must have finished Star Wars and is now going to work on Star Trek, which means that he knows your pain. He has watched Clone Wars.
Yes.
Because I remember you were going through just watching all of Star Wars or as much as you could stomach, and then you got to Clone Wars and you couldn't make it through. So this movie came out in 2014. Clone Wars had been out since 2008. So he definitely watched some of that bad shit.
Yeah, that was rough. That was brutal. It was
and
brutal.
like, listen, now before the audience gets pissed at me, I love Clone Wars. The later seasons, it gets great, but it's a slog getting through like the first 3 seasons. Like, I understand why people drop out. It's really painful.
Honestly.
So, but I'm just waiting for Cap to get to Star Trek because I feel like that's more his speed.
Mhm.
Something that I noticed, they put it really blatantly in the shot when he's in his apartment and gonna talk to Nick Fury. I almost did it again. But it goes past his bookshelf and you see Hillary Clinton's memoir like in the middle of the screen. And I was just like, ooh, it just hit me with like the cringe wave, just kind of like blew me backwards.
And that's pre 2016 Hillary Clinton too. Like, oh,
yep. So
Oof.
it was it was rough. I'm trying to think of the other things that I had to say about this movie. It was a strange movie, but I didn't like I said, I didn't dislike it. There was a lot to like about it. It definitely made me like Captain America. I feel like they successfully made him a character where I feel like he was on life support in the previous movies as far as having a personality goes. The first movie really felt like so obligatory. It felt like it was like, we have to do Captain America. Here's him doing things you would assume Captain America would do, but we're not really going to go any deeper than that. And then in Avengers, they were just like, we are really obsessed with Tony Stark and Loki and sure. But he got his movie and I liked a lot of what he had to do, and it made me go, I like Captain America. He's kind of a cool guy. He's a nice guy, and then he seems like he's got a good heart, and he's not a complete idiot. And I like that part. I feel like there was a lot going on in this movie that didn't get enough time. And actually, I talked about it with my partner Doe quite a bit because Doe's been very, very into watching all these with me, and she did not really expect, but yeah, Doe loves watching through these movies with me. And Doe was like, "Oh man, I can't wait for you to watch Civil War because there's so much. If I could take these two movies and smush them together and rearrange them, I feel like I could make both movies better." And I was like, "Well, I'm looking forward to see Civil War then." And I don't know, I can't really speak to it because I haven't seen it, so
I'm looking forward to you seeing that one then.
Yeah, because I'm like, there's like, and I feel like I'm wondering if I'm gonna feel the same way because there's a lot of stuff in here that I was like, oh, the Bucky Barnes, like it feels like the setup to this movie, everything, so much time in the first like hour of this movie is all about Cap's relationship with Nick Fury. And when I was watching it, I was expecting it to be, okay, this movie is gonna be about reconciling a guy who's like always acts from his heart and a guy who always acts from strategy. Like, that's what I thought. Like, it's like, oh, okay, like Nick Fury is like, he's like willing to like have a big gunfight like in the middle of town and use civilian vehicles as a shield because he believes that, you know, shield is like that important to the world, and Cap would like never do that. Like, he would take hits to himself. So I thought it was going to be like, how do we reconcile these two? And then they kind of just like don't. They're just like, nah, actually, that's over. Don't worry about that. Like, it's more about how like actually every bad thing that America has ever done was actually caused by a secret parasite that's inside of us that we need to get out.
Well, I mean, like, considering that the secret parasite was Nazis, like, you know, it kind of feels like that's true. Like, we've always kind of had Nazis here.
I get where they're coming from. But it's also like they're depicting like world events and like America has gone to war and surveilled its own people from the like Zola guy. And then it's like, well, yeah, but the CIA did that. The organization that you end up being like, no, it's actually Hydra. Don't worry, guys. It's not here. It's those guys, the guys who do the hang glider pose. So, like, I don't disagree with the idea that, like, fascism runs through a lot of elements of this, but that is, like, definitively not what the movie says. In fact, it goes to lengths to be like, no, don't get that message from it. It's Hydra. And if you take care of Hydra, you're good. But that aside, I was surprised that they did that. And like the Bucky stuff felt like you don't even know what a Winter Soldier is until like about halfway through the movie. You get an idea of like a guy who's like he's a secret guy, and it's like kind of pulling at you. It's like, oh, who's this guy? He's like an assassin or something. But to have it be like, oh, this is like his best friend, and have all that development, there's just not enough time for it to fully develop, in my opinion, the way that like it should have for that kind of storyline. So I'm like, I don't know. There's a lot of mixed directions that this movie is going in that don't 100% make sense to me.
I think that there's two things happening. One is that I think that there is some kind of assumption on the part of the filmmakers that people will rewatch the most recent movies when the new one comes out.
Yeah.
But in reality, what's happening is people watch this movie and then they don't see it for 2 or 3 years. So you have to like reestablish the characters. So, and this is part of the problem that I have with later installments. The more superheroes we get, like, you know, we get to Avengers Endgame and Infinity War, and I'm like, there are so many characters, and those movies rely very heavily on, I mean, and of course they rely very heavily on all of the character work that has been done previously. But yes, most viewers, I think, are probably like the moviegoers. They go see it in the theaters, and then maybe they see it once in the background at a party they go to or something, and then they go see the next one in the theaters. So you do kind of need in each movie to spend at least some time establishing the characters. And like, yes, we need to know what their personality is. We need to know what their past relationship is. This one kind of tries it out with a flashback where like Bucky is like, yo, I care about you. You just went to your mom's funeral. That sucks. And it shows how Steve is often reliant on Bucky because he's like, yo, here's your house key. You're so helpless. You don't even know where your keys are. But I do think that is kind of something that is just a struggle when you're building a franchise with so many different players. I did want to make a couple of character comments about Captain America himself. So I think interestingly that Steve shares some qualities with Goku. You have the fight at the beginning of the movie, and Batroc is like, I thought you were more than just a shield. And Cap's like, bet, let's find out. And that's just a very Goku moment to me, like that he was holding back and then decides to like, it's like, oh, we're playing games now. Let's go. And in that same scene, I also think that it's worth pointing out just about Cap's character that he is able to understand and speak French.
Which he didn't in the first movie.
Yeah, so that speaks to, it seems initially that it speaks to a more interconnected society because French is offered in high schools, or at least it used to be more popular in high school like curriculums. Now it's probably leaning toward more Spanish. And also, there was a French guy in the Howling Commandos. So it speaks to like his experiences as a more worldly person. And I feel like that's part of what makes him seem so dated, because most people nowadays do not have as much familiarity with non-American cultures and like less exposure to other languages. So I just think that that's like an interesting character moment for Cap. And then the other
it's definitely a different direction than in Avengers. Like, Avengers is like, could I have it in American, please? And it's
you guys aren't speaking English enough for me.
Yeah.
Which I feel like this is just a movie that's like, we don't care. Like, we're going to make Cap more interesting. It
Yep.
introduces problems for like the world, the cinematic universe as a whole, but
That's a
I
problem
think it
for
makes
future
for more.
writers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I think it's more
Someone
interesting. Makes a more interesting Cap. Anyway, yeah. I just wanted to say that.
I gotta say,
yeah.
like, just in terms of talking about the interconnectedness of the MCU, Agents of Shield's first season had premiered the year, like the TV season year that this movie came out. I was an avid watcher of it, and I remember walking out of this movie going, "Well, that's gonna change things on the show." And I gotta say, like, the first half of the first season of Agents of Shield is very mid, very very mid. Like, nobody cared about it. I was just sticking with it because it was, the MCU when they brought Coulson back. But once this plot line goes in, like, it's a fucking phenomenal show, and I would recommend people watch it. But I also remember that they invited the cast of Agents of Shield like before they had even filmed like the storylines that they were going to be doing in post Winter Soldier. Like, they had the cast sit down for like a preview screening of the movie, and they just watched it and they're like, "Did you guys just fire us in a movie?" But they did not, and it was so much. Like, the show does so much with this, because obviously, Cap says Shield has to end, and it doesn't really end. It just has to go underground, and it's rebuilt with the good CIA agents. But it is a lot of fun, and I would recommend people check that movie out, or that show out. I feel like it doesn't get as much love as some of the other MCU shows, probably because it was in that time before Kevin Feige was involved with the TV wing of Marvel itself. With that being said, we're coming up on an hour here, so let's get last thoughts. Moss?
Yeah. I just thought my last character development thing that I appreciated about Cap is like the relationship between him and Black Widow throughout this movie. I enjoyed the influence that they have on each other. She points out that Cap is a bad liar. And then the very next moment when he's asked like the same question, why was Nick Fury at your house? He lies more convincingly. So I just think that that's interesting, like the spy's influence on him as the soldier. But yeah, overall thoughts. Yeah, I mean, it's got some really interesting things going on with it. I'm fascinated with the fact that every Captain America movie has more than one elevator that is somehow crucial to the plot. There is probably going to be an unhinged video essay in my future where I go over this in depth because it just bothers me so much. I don't know why. So many elevators in these movies. Yeah, overall, pretty enjoyable. I do think that there is an interesting question about like how our justice system tends to be reactive and that can be very frustrating. And then this movie takes like a proactive measure to the extreme of like, how can we actually prevent crime? And it's hard to do that without becoming deeply authoritarian, it seems. So I do personally think that those are some interesting questions that are more suited for a place that is not this podcast. But overall, pretty enjoyable. Liked some of the character stuff. Could have fleshed out more with the character beats and people's motivations. Nick Fury is basically just chaotic good. He's basically just Varys from Game of Thrones. Like, he does weird stuff that is bad, and you have to just kind of be rest assured, I'm on the people's side. I do the bad things that I do in order to protect people. So overall, decent movie. Again, still one of the more forgettable ones for me. Decent action scenes. Could have done some things better, but overall, fine.
Final thoughts, DemonMama?
Yeah, I liked a lot of the action in this movie. I thought it was more entertaining to watch. I found the characters more interesting in this movie. As for how the movie was structured and how it plugged into the rest of the series, I don't know. I didn't really love a lot of the decisions with the structure in the film. I felt like it was focusing on a lot of things that didn't really resolve together. But the overall viewing experience was a step up from certainly the first Captain America movie. And I don't know. I don't think I liked it quite as much as I liked the Avengers, just because I thought the Avengers was very entertaining all the way through and super engaging. And I kind of checked out on some of the like shallow CIA drama stuff. Didn't really work for me. There were a lot of characters that felt like, I don't know, like they were just like, we're here to spin up a CIA guy that you can see get punched in the end. And I was like, okay, whatever. That doesn't really work for me. All in all, I am happy that Captain America got a character, and I'm very interested to see how this plugs into the other movies that we're going to watch in the future. If it does, I don't know if it does. We're coming up on a lot of movies that I haven't seen.
I'm excited for that.
we're watching. Is it Age of Ultron next?
Age of Ultron next, yeah.
So Age of Ultron is the last. Okay, in the timeline, I think it's like Age of Ultron. I've seen the first Guardians of the Galaxy, and I've seen Thor Ragnarok, and then none of the rest. So any of the other ones that we do are going to be totally new ground. I have seen Ultron, but it has been a really long time since I've seen Ultron, so I don't remember everything from it. So I'm interested to see how this all plugs together. We'll see what they can do, or if it doesn't. That will also be interesting to me. So I'm here for the. I'm here to talk with pointing out the things that I'm like, what the hell are they doing with this shit?
To borrow and paraphrase from fascists, weak Captain America movies make strong Avengers movies. Strong Avengers movies make strong Captain America movies. And strong Captain America movies make weak Avengers movies. So we'll see you next time in Age of Ultron. Have a great night, everyone.